The desperate plea, the emergency beacon from Celestara Prime, cut through the peaceful hum of the Galactic Assembly's headquarters like a knife through silk. Ambassador Corvain of the Zalathi Federation watched the holographic display flicker to life, revealing scenes that would haunt him for cycles to come. The transmission was fragmentary, broken by interference and distance, but the message was painfully clear. Thousands of colonists from multiple species were trapped on a mining world at the edge of civilized space, under assault by the Ravagers, a nomadic force of pirates who had grown increasingly bold in recent months. The Assembly Hall, a massive spherical chamber floating in the neutral zone between three major galactic powers, erupted into chaos. Representatives from 47 different species began speaking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the universal translators struggled to process. Corvain's crystalline form pulsed with distress colors as he processed the information flooding in from multiple sources. The Ravagers had brought an entire battle group to Celestara Prime. Not a raid this time, but a full invasion force intent on stripping the planet of its rare minerals and enslaving its population. High Chancellor Theron, an ancient being whose species had founded the Assembly 3,000 years ago, raised his tendrils for silence. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience. The situation was dire, he acknowledged. The nearest Assembly peacekeeping force was stationed in the Andromeda sector, a full month's journey even at maximum speed. By the time they arrived, Celestara Prime would be nothing but a scorched reminder of the Assembly's failure to protect its citizens. The debate that followed was as predictable as it was futile. Some called for economic sanctions against systems that traded with the Ravagers. Others proposed sending a strongly worded communique threatening future consequences. The military representatives from the Saurian Empire suggested mobilizing their fleet, but everyone knew their ships were too far away and too few in number to make a difference. As the hours passed and the situation grew more desperate, Corvain found himself thinking about the newest members of the Assembly, a species that had joined only 25 years ago after a first contact incident that still made seasoned diplomats nervous. Humanity had burst onto the galactic scene in a way no other species had before. When the hegemony's exploration fleet had attempted to claim Earth's moon as a forward base, assuming the primitive radio signals from the planet below indicated a pre-spaceflight civilization, they had been in for a shock. The humans had not only detected their approach, but had responded with a military force that defied all expectations. The entire hegemony fleet, 30 ships strong, had been disabled in less than 6 hours without a single human casualty. The humans had then politely but firmly escorted the surrendered crews back to assembly space, with a message that essentially said, "We come in peace, but we're fully prepared for war." Since joining the assembly, humans had been model citizens. They shared their medical knowledge freely, traded fairly, and their explorers had charted more new systems in 2 decades than most species managed in a century. But everyone remembered that first contact. Everyone remembered what humanity was capable of when threatened. Corvain's assistant, a young Zalathi named Prin, leaned close and whispered what many were thinking but none dared say aloud. "The humans maintained a rapid response fleet," she said. "They called it the Solar Guard, and rumors suggested their ships could cross vast distances in a fraction of the time it took other species." The Chancellor must have been thinking along similar lines, because his next words sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it was time to request assistance from our newest members." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ever-chattering Mikari delegates fell quiet. Everyone knew what the Chancellor was suggesting, and the implications were staggering. The Assembly had never requested military aid from a member species before. It would set a precedent that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Ambassador Harrison, the human representative, stood slowly. She was a small figure by galactic standards, barely 2 meters tall, with no natural armor, no claws, no apparent biological advantages. Yet somehow, when she spoke, every being in the chamber paid attention. "Earth stood ready to assist," she said simply, but she wanted the Assembly to understand what they were asking. Human military doctrine was different from the limited peacekeeping actions the Assembly was accustomed to. When humans responded to a threat, they did so with overwhelming force designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. The vote was called, and despite the misgivings of many, it passed by a narrow margin. The formal request was drafted with careful diplomatic language, but its essence was simple. The Galactic Assembly requested the aid of Earth's military forces in responding to the humanitarian crisis on Celestera Prime. Harrison received the request on her personal communicator and forwarded it immediately to Earth via quantum entanglement communication. The response came back in less than 5 minutes, so fast that many delegates assumed it was an automated acknowledgement. It was not. Admiral Rachel Santos stood on the bridge of the TNS Retribution, flagship of the Third Fleet, and read the message for the third time. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, already implementing the orders that had come down from Earth Command. The Solar Guard had been preparing for something like this since humanity joined the Assembly. Not hoping for it, but preparing nonetheless. They had studied every major military force in the galaxy, analyzed their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. Now, for the first time, they would show the galaxy what humanity had learned from 10,000 years of warfare. The fleet that assembled at the edge of Earth's solar system was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. 12 capital ships, each one a kilometer-long fortress of armor and weapons, 36 escort vessels, sleek and deadly, support ships carrying medical supplies, emergency shelters, and enough food to feed a small planet. But most impressive of all were the troop transports. The galaxy had never seen anything like Earth's Marine Corps. Soldiers enhanced with powered armor that turned each individual into a walking tank. As the fleet prepared to jump, Admiral Santos addressed her crews. They were not going to Celestera Prime for conquest or glory. They were going because somewhere in the vast darkness of space, innocent beings were crying out for help, and humanity had the power to answer that call. The mission parameters were simple: save the colonists, neutralize the Ravager threat, and show the galaxy that humanity took its responsibilities seriously. The quantum jump drives, a human innovation that had surprised even their own scientists, powered up with a distinctive whine. In the assembly hall, delegates watched in awe as the tracking data showed the human fleet disappearing from Earth's orbit and reappearing at the edge of the Celestera system in the span of a heartbeat. What would have taken other species weeks or months, humanity had accomplished in seconds. The age of human intervention in galactic affairs had begun. Back on the assembly station, Corvain watched the tactical display with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He had advocated for calling in the humans, but now, watching their fleet move with predatory grace toward Celestera Prime, he wondered what forces they had unleashed. The Ravagers had no idea what was coming for them. In truth, neither did the rest of the galaxy. The next few hours would either mark humanity as the galaxy's greatest protectors or its most terrifying warriors. Perhaps, Corvain thought as he watched the human fleet accelerate to speeds that shouldn't have been possible, they would be both. Thunder across the stars. The Ravager fleet orbiting Celestera Prime detected the quantum signatures 30 seconds before the human ships arrived. Commander Gorthak, a battle-scarred veteran of 100 raids, initially dismissed the readings as sensor ghosts. Nothing could travel through quantum space that quickly. Nothing could maintain formation during a jump of that distance. Yet as the signatures solidified into the distinctive profiles of warships, Gorthak felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine fear. Admiral Santos stood at the center of the Retribution's Combat Information Center, watching as her fleet emerged from quantum space in perfect formation. The tactical display lit up with enemy positions, civilian settlements, and thousands of life signs scattered across the planet's surface. The Ravager fleet consisted of 8 heavy cruisers and dozens of smaller attack craft, impressive by pirate standards, but woefully unprepared for what was about to happen. Santos opened a channel on all frequencies, knowing the universal translators would carry her message to every ship, every settlement, and every frightened colonist below. This was Admiral Rachel Santos of the Terran Navy, she announced, her voice carrying the absolute confidence of someone who had already won the battle in her mind. The Ravager forces had exactly 5 minutes to cease all hostile actions and prepare for boarding. Any ship that powered weapons or attempted to flee would be destroyed. There would be no second warning. The response was predictable. Gorthak, who had built his reputation on never backing down from a fight, ordered his fleet to attack formation. The Ravagers had terrorized this sector for generations. They would not be intimidated by newcomers regardless of their reputation. It was the last mistake Gorthak would ever make. The human fleet moved with a coordination that seemed impossible for ships of their size. The Retribution's main guns, rail cannons that accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed, targeted the Ravager flagship with surgical precision. The first salvo didn't destroy Gorthak's ship. It disabled it, taking out weapons, engines, and communications in a display of marksmanship that defied belief. The other human ships followed suit, each one engaging multiple targets simultaneously with a variety of weapons the galaxy had never seen before. The Ravagers tried to return fire, but their plasma bolts and missile volleys met an impenetrable wall of point defense systems. Tiny interceptor drones, no larger than a human fist, swarmed out from the human ships in their thousands, creating a protective cloud that destroyed incoming projectiles with laser precision. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Within 3 minutes, every Ravager ship was either disabled or destroyed, their crews either dead or desperately signaling surrender. But the real shock came when the human ground forces deployed. Drop pods launched from the troop transports, screaming through Celestara Prime's atmosphere like meteors. Each pod contained a squad of Marines in power armor that made them nearly invulnerable to small arms fire. They landed directly in the middle of Ravager ground positions, and what followed was not combat, but a systematic dismantling of the pirate forces. The Marines moved with superhuman speed and coordination, their armor's AI systems allowing them to share tactical data in real time. On the planet's surface, colonist Yarix huddled with her younglings in what had been a school before the Ravagers turned it into a detention center. She had watched through a cracked window as the pirates rounded up her neighbors, had heard the screams and the energy weapon discharges. Now she heard something different. The rhythmic thunder of armored boots and voices speaking in a language her translator identified as Earth Standard. The door to their prison exploded inward, but instead of Ravager soldiers, armored figures entered with weapons raised. One of the Marines, his armor marked with medical symbols, immediately moved to check on the younglings. His helmet retracted, revealing a human face that, despite its alien features, radiated concern and determination. The colonists were safe now, he said, his suit's speakers projecting his words in perfect Zalathi. Medical teams were already en route, and evacuation shuttles would arrive within the hour. Anyone who needed immediate medical attention would be treated first. The efficiency was staggering. Within 6 hours of their arrival, the humans had completely neutralized the Ravager threat and begun humanitarian operations. Field hospitals appeared as if from nowhere, massive prefabricated structures that provided better medical care than most frontier worlds had ever seen. Human medics worked alongside local healers, their advanced equipment diagnosing and treating injuries that would have been death sentences just hours before. Food distribution centers were established, water purification systems deployed, and communication networks restored. It was as if the humans had rehearsed this exact scenario 1,000 times. Admiral Santos toured the planet's surface personally, something that shocked both her own staff and the local population. Galactic military doctrine held that admirals commanded from orbit, safely removed from ground combat. But Santos walked through the liberated settlements, spoke with survivors, and personally ensured that aid reached those who needed it most. When local leaders asked why Earth had responded so quickly and decisively to their plea, Santos gave an answer that would be quoted across the galaxy for generations. Humanity, she said, had learned through bitter experience that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph was for good beings to do nothing. Earth had spent millennia learning the cost of that inaction, had paid for that knowledge in blood and tears. Now that humanity had the power to help others to prevent suffering, they would not stand idle. The strong had a duty to protect the weak, not because it brought glory or power, but because it was right. The aftermath of what became known as the Celestara Intervention sent shockwaves through the Galactic Assembly. The speed and effectiveness of the human response forced a complete re-evaluation of humanity's place in the galactic community. Some species were terrified, seeing in humanity's military might a potential threat to the established order. Others were inspired, recognizing that the galaxy now had protectors willing and able to stand against those who would prey on the innocent. The Ravagers, as an organized force, ceased to exist. Those who survived the intervention were tried for their crimes, but the message had been sent to every pirate, slaver, and would-be conqueror in the galaxy. Humanity was watching, and humanity would respond. The Solar Guard established a permanent base in the Celestera system, not as occupiers but as protectors, their presence a deterrent to anyone who might threaten peaceful worlds. In the assembly hall, the debate over humanity's actions continued for weeks. Some called for restrictions on human military operations, fearing the precedent that had been set, but Ambassador Harrison's response silenced even the most vocal critics. She reminded them that humanity had acted only when asked, had used only the force necessary to save lives, and had immediately begun humanitarian aid. If the assembly preferred, humanity would withdraw from military operations entirely, but they should understand that the next Celestera Prime would have no salvation coming. The vote to formally thank humanity for their intervention passed unanimously. Even those who feared human power recognized that in their darkest hour, when all seemed lost, humanity had answered the call. They had crossed impossible distances, faced down a ruthless enemy, and asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that innocent lives had been saved. The galaxy had learned that day what made humanity truly dangerous, not their weapons or their ships, but their unwavering conviction that with great power came great responsibility. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, leaving behind a rebuilt Celestera Prime and a changed galaxy, Admiral Santos received thousands of messages from across known space. Colony worlds that had lived in fear of raiders, peaceful species that had been victimized for generations, all sending the same message. Thank you. Humanity had shown the galaxy that there was another way, that the strong could choose to be guardians rather than conquerors. The age of human intervention had begun, and the universe would never be the same.